everyone, Alexa Donne here, and today I want to talk a little bit about being realistic about your writing to kind of save yourself from heartbreak where you can, kind of. It's something kind of nebulous that we don't talk about a lot, but I think is really, really important when you're basically trying to make it in the industry. I mean, anytime you're putting your art out there for public consumption and you're going to get things back, I think having a very realistic sense of what you write, why you write it, and how the things that you write typically are received, some of the potential pitfalls. I mean, it will never make any of the bad stuff better, but it can help with some of the self-doubt and emotional pitfalls of writing. So what do I mean by this? I mean really understanding what your books actually are, what you're actually good at versus what you're maybe not so good at, leaning into your strengths, and of course always trying to overcome weaknesses, but there are some things that you just maybe don't do that you don't do for a reason, that you don't need to do. Generally, what I'm speaking of is kind of understanding where your writing and your talents and your work falls in the marketplace. So whether you write frothy romances or thoughtful sci-fis, kind of serious contemporary issues books, intricate fantasy, it's important to actually understand what you write, what it actually is, and then how it might work out in the broader world. Why? Because this helps you set realistic expectations for your career. This helps you set realistic expectations for feedback that you might get, how you might fare in reviews with general readership, with fellow authors. And the reality is, if you write certain things versus other things, sometimes you're going to come up against genre snobbery, all sorts of things, and there are feelings that happen. So I'm approaching this from the point of view of someone who has accepted about herself that I write pretty frothy, soapy, hyper-commercial work that isn't for everyone. I've definitely encountered genre snobbery in the sci-fi community, and then I've also just had my fair share of negative reviews where people think my books are stupid because they're romance. I've had people say nothing happens in my book, and then I just kind of look at them and go, well, it's literally a romance, and romance things happen. It's a romance plot, but if you don't like romance, of course it's gonna feel like nothing is happening, and you have to accept that your book will hopefully find the right readers, but very often your book also will find the wrong readers, and those wrong readers have every right to criticize your work for what it wasn't. Of course, we all hope that they just wouldn't bother, but nothing's perfect. So, meaning, I don't beat myself up when people don't like my work because I'm like, well, if they don't particularly like frothy or soapy romance, of course this isn't really going to be to their taste. Not to make it entirely personal, but another example, I write unlikable heroines a lot of the time, and that can rub people the wrong way. And also just generally, when you write very commercial fiction where it is lighter, a lot of criticisms you'll get are, well, this book isn't important, it doesn't mean anything, I like more serious fiction. You're going to get that. And if you're on the opposite end, if you write serious fiction, you might get criticism that it was boring or that it didn't entertain people. No matter what you write, there's always going to be someone who doesn't like what you write. So I think it's just a good step for a writer to take as they're really thinking about what they write to understand what they write. Another reason for this is you need to actually know how your work, the type of work that you write, how it does. On the one end, this can literally mean the type of stuff I write that I like to write, that I'm good at writing, just doesn't sell in traditional publishing. And so it can mean leaning into the thing you like and love to write, but taking the publishing path that is going to suit it best. And you have to realign your expectations, or you have to change what you write. Like, you can't shove a square peg into a round hole. If traditional publishing isn't picking up what you're putting down, you gotta put something else down, or you have to move over to where you can fit your peg. Just an example. Also understanding what you write in terms of commercial appeal, sales potential, etc. Some types of books, if they are more niche, for example, are simply going to have a smaller potential audience. This doesn't mean that those readers are worth less. It just might mean, well, you're not going to be a runaway bestseller because the audience potential just isn't there. But the audience that you can reach is incredibly valuable because you're reaching the readers who need that book, if that makes sense. But meaning I've seen authors who have very outsized expectations for work that is just not as broadly commercially appealing, and then they beat themselves up when they don't meet those sales expectations. And that hurts me. Don't do that to yourself. And generally in terms of audience, I want to let you know, or remind you if you already knew this, but just it's worth talking about that there do tend to be two distinctly different camps of readers, of absorbers of story. There are people who like to read to be entertained. They're looking for something to carry them along, sweep them away, high octane, exciting storytelling, some deep characters, etc. And they care a little bit less about the mechanics. It doesn't have to be perfect prose, or the book doesn't have to have deep meaning. You can satisfy that type of reader and make them happy with a well-told story. Then there's the other type of reader who cares about all that stuff. They want really beautiful prose, they want deep meaning in their books, and they're willing to accept maybe a slower pace, a less commercial concept, because those are the kinds of stories that they enjoy. All sorts exist, and you cannot make all of those types of people or readers happy all at once. So know what kind of books you actually write. And I mentioned genre snobbery. It's real. There's also going to be people who are going to look down on you no matter what if you write certain types of books. Most commonly, romance, young adult fiction, even kind of hyper-commercial cheesy things like thrillers. In some spheres, fantasy. Literary snobs are going to look down on any genre, fantasy, sci-fi. So just kind of understand that it's rarely personal. It's usually that person having a bias. That sucks, but you kind of have to let it roll off your back. I also think it's important to understand the relative quality of your work. Now, this is easier said than done, and in fact, I have a whole video called Are You a Good Writer?, which I have a link to down below, and you'll know the catch-22 if you've watched that video, which is some writers are incapable of honestly evaluating how good their work is, and usually when you are at that end of the scale, you're usually kind of mediocre. And here's the thing, mediocre authors do get published, or certainly can publish, so let's leave that aside. I want to talk to those of you who are capable of evaluating your own work. I think it's really important not to get too big an ego about yourself, to be honest, because what I've seen a lot of is authors who just take themselves too seriously. They think they're literally the greatest thing since sliced bread, and they can't therefore take any criticism of the writing. I say don't take yourself too seriously. Like, kind of understand where you fall, like, oh, I'm a decent average writer, or I'm slightly above average, or even, I'm mediocre, but I can tell a good story. I think it's good to understand what you actually write so that you can target the right audience and not have too huge an ego, and understand that thing I talked about, that there are readers who read to be entertained and there are readers who care a lot more about kind of the quality of the writing. I know this is weird to talk about, but what I'm trying to say is understand where you actually fall in the grand scheme of things, carefully navigating things like imposter syndrome, where we all think we're total crap, but to have a more realistic sense of what you actually write, the quality of your writing, the quality of your storytelling, so that you just don't take yourself too seriously, because there is nothing worse than a super smug, egotistical person who thinks they are God's gift to writing when they're actually kind of deeply mediocre, but they can tell a decent story, and that's why they're successful. That just rubs me the wrong way, and it rubs readers the wrong way too. And here's the thing, there's nothing wrong with just being okay, but telling a story well and being successful. You have to accept that about yourself so that you're not wistfully thinking, oh, I really want to be one of those beautiful, important writers. I have a video on that too, about how you don't have to write an important book, and that this all kind of ties together. There's room for both important books as well as just kind of entertaining, fun books. At the end of the day, what really matters is what you actually enjoy writing. And if what you enjoy writing, if what's fun for you is silly, frothy books or serious, hard-hitting fiction, whatever it is, that's what matters. It's what you really like doing and you're good at it and there is an audience for it. So just be realistic about what you write, why, the limitations of what you write, and don't be an egotistical monster, basically. So what do you think? Let me know down below in the comments what you think about being realistic about what you write and kind of giving yourself that tough self-love of it's okay to not be everything for everyone. And give this video a thumbs up if you like it, and I will make more discussion style videos about topics in writing and publishing. If you're not already subscribed to the channel, go ahead and do that. I post new videos 2 to 3 times a week. As always, guys, thank you so much for watching, and happy writing.